Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast may contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews of newly released films, be sure to check out our show on our YouTube channel. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. We at Reviews Without Remorse would like to thank George Lucas for warning us right from the start. I am the venerable Jedi Knight David, and with me is my Padawan learner, Joe.
Are you an angel?
This is episode 145, and in this show we will discuss The Mandalorian has premiered. Joe and I have watched, and we will offer a mini review of the first episode. And then, the first of the new trilogy after a 16-year wait. Joe and I try to sort out Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. How you doing, sir?
I am doing wonderful. I am home, back on my own couch where my fat ass belongs, and oh boy, it feels good. So, good to be home.
I am very glad that you are home, sir. Very, very glad. And, yes, now, this is going to be extremely interesting, I feel. We have a little bit of a situation where, with the benefit of hindsight, you know, does the movie look different in our eyes now when you compare it to the current new trilogy? Don't know. I got to be honest with you. I'm kind of more feeling like perhaps The Mandalorian will taint the review more than anything else.
I am so glad you said that, because I swear I was thinking the same thing.
We will see, because we're going to get started.
Let's get it on.
Five minutes into the first episode of The Mandalorian, I texted Joe, and I said, these first 5 minutes are better than anything that was in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi put together. It was a very good introduction to the character, I felt. And, I mean, to sum up before we go into anything else, I'm just going to say, I liked it, and I'm curious where it's going. What about you, Joe?
Very, very, very similar. I right out of the gate, and I mean, obviously, this is kind of a. Are we doing spoilers? Well, I guess we just won't talk about the ending and just, you know.
No. This is just, like I said, mini review. When the series is done, we might do a more in-depth review. But this is just kind of an introduction.
Yeah, that works for me. I'm with you. In the first 5 minutes, I was like, I am on board. This was exactly kind of really what I was sort of hoping for, frankly. It right out of the gate, it didn't disappoint. And it honestly goes back to what I've always said, in that I every time we talk Star Wars, I've always said the world of Star Wars is big and vast and rich, that you could do all kinds of stories within it. And basically what we've got here is kind of Clint Eastwood, you know, the
man with no name.
Yeah, there you go. You know, I mean, this is like a Western in space. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I was loving everything about it. I was enjoying the hell out of it. And yeah, I really just felt like this. Why is this so hard for the other guys to figure out? Because the guys doing this show got it.
This episode was written by Jon Favreau and was directed by Dave Filoni, which, you know, everybody thought it was going to be the other way around, but according to the credits in the show, it was written by Jon, but directed by Dave Filoni. Now, Dave Filoni, he is the creator of the Clone Wars animated series, the Star Wars Rebels animated series. He's very respected within the Star Wars community. And I feel for his live-action directorial debut, he did a hell of a job.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know I've heard you and other people say that he really should be the one running the show, not Kathleen Kennedy. And I really haven't seen the other stuff. I just hear great things about it. And then I saw this. I said, yes, Yes, I'm totally on board. I mean, and I was even just on the trailer, I was sort of comparing this to Rogue One. I said that was, again, loved Rogue One, can't stand the other crap. This, I frankly thought this was sort of like, it's like they took Rogue One, but they polished it better to get it just right. Where like a lot of the fan service in Rogue One, like a lot of people complained about it. I wasn't so upset about it. But the fact that we're talking about it made it sort of seem clunky. I felt like here, it was much more fluid and organic. So I was told every time I saw something, I went, ooh, you know, I mean, it was more subtle. It was more, again, like a kind of a diehard fan will pick up a lot more than just your average. I mean, there was a couple references. Honestly, when I didn't watch any of the reviews that people were doing for the show, until I saw it, and I saw one or two where it was kind of like the Easter eggs you might have missed, and I kind of went, oh yeah, like there was a couple that were like, there was one or two, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but you probably don't talk about it. There was a couple that I was like, I can't believe they referenced that, you know, I mean, it was really, really good.
I'm just going to be as subtle as humanly possible about this and just say that this show has now made the Star Wars Holiday Special canon.
The Star Wars Holiday Special. Starring Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. Harrison Ford as Han Solo. Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia.
Not going to say why. Not going to say why. Because when it happened, when the thing I think you're referencing happened, I noticed it immediately. It's like, oh my god, it's canon now.
It was so funny. I didn't even catch it at first, and then when I was like, oh my god, I was so annoyed with myself that I missed it when I saw it. But then when it was pointed out, I was like, oh my god, that is brilliant.
I had a blast with this show, and it's short. Yeah. It's only like 38 minutes, the first episode.
Yeah,
it is very, but so much is packed in there. The action sequences are very well directed. I didn't know what to expect about Taika Waititi voicing IG-11. A part of me was like, well, I mean, you know, he's funny, but I don't know if that's what we're looking for in a robot. And I like that he dialed it back and just kept it straightforward. And I thought he was a great little character as well. Even for a robot, he was a good character. I liked all the characters that I met in the show. I loved seeing Carl Weathers. I loved Werner Herzog. Okay,
great casting.
Exactly. What a tremendous cast. And you know what? I don't care. This is not a spoiler. The thing that I loved the most, we still don't know his name. He never took off his helmet. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, it was super, super cool. I seriously, I love how it, like, when you spot, I kind of can't stand when Star Wars movies feel that they have to make, like, again, you can sort of feel when the whole point of doing a movie is to sell toys. Because when you see just all new species, characters, I like that kind of drives me a little nutty. I like when again, the whole reason why Star Wars is such a fun, rich world to play in, when you get to know it and you see things that you recognize. Again, I think a lot of people will sort of brush it off as fan service, but no, I like that we've set up this world and now we sort of know. I mean, there's so much great stuff to sort of choose from and play with. So, and it was great. Like the IG robot. I guess he's not technically IG-88. It was just another similar.
Yeah.
I loved how it moved. You know, like I remember when you first saw him in Empire, he was just sort of standing there, like didn't move, didn't do anything, and you're kind of going like, how the heck would that thing ever, be a bounty hunter? It doesn't look like it looks like it doesn't even move, like it's made out of wood. And then you see it here, and it's like, oh, there it is, like that. Kind of makes some sense. There was some great logic to its movements and everything. I tell you, they really pulled it off great.
I completely agree. It is, Disney Plus is $7 a month, and I know we're starting to sound like shills for it, but frankly, this is worth it. I would happily put out money for this, and I think you all should too. This was this was a revitalizing thing to watch. It made the next thing that we're going to review harder. I was kind of feeling like we were going to go into the review of Phantom Menace, a little more positive, simply because of the bad experience with the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But now, after watching The Mandalorian, it's like, okay, you know what? This isn't a case that you don't know what the hell to do. You've got people that know what the hell to do. Let them do it.
Right. Absolutely. And by the way, it does end on a very interesting cliffhanger. And I almost felt like when that happened, I was thrown for such a loop. I wasn't positive that I even liked it, because I was sort of nervous. Now, all right, are we going to get now is the tone going to shift wildly because of this this interesting cliffhanger? But still, I got perfect faith in it, because this first one was just spectacular. Just thumbs up, a very enthusiastic 2 thumbs up from me.
I get the feeling we're going to be doing these mini reviews every week.
It's very possible. Is it a weekly show now?
Yes,
every week?
It is a weekly show. New episodes every Friday. There'll be a new episode this Friday.
And how many? Do you know how many episodes are going to be?
I think there's 8.
Okay. All right.
So I wouldn't mind opening the show with a mini review of The Mandalorian. So
fine by me.
You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. You believe it's this boy?
2 Jedi escape a hostile blockade to find allies and come across a young boy who may bring balance to the Force. But the long-dormant Sith resurface to claim their old glory. Written and directed by George Lucas, Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I am thankful that for the next 2 movies, I don't have to go through a giant laundry list of names to credit. Because it's all going to be written and directed by George Lucas. I'm happy for that. So that much I'm happy about. Now, before we get into this, Joe, you've been teasing this with me for weeks. You mentioned that when we saw Phantom Menace together, that I said something. And I don't probably remember what it was, but I'd like to hear what this is. I've been purposely holding off waiting until today. So I want to know, what is it that I said that you remember from, 20 years ago now?
Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't one specific thing you said. Rather, I specifically remember we went to see this together. And I remember standing on your back deck of your apartment in Cedar Grove, I guess it was. And I'll just say it, you tried very hard to defend this movie. And I right out of the gate didn't hate it, but I just kind of was like, yeah, something wasn't, no. And I remember kind of just sort of like going through the motions, and by the time, I was like, yeah, and then I was like, you know what? No, didn't like it. And I think you were, I remember you at one point you were very defensive of it, and you're like, oh, but come on this, and oh, but come on that, and the Force is, the Force makes stuff happen, and I'm like, yeah, no, not buying it. And I
oh my God, was I that obtuse?
Yeah, well,
or was it just PTSD?
Well, you weren't ready. You were just so excited by it that you weren't ready to just say, to kind of come to the realization that it was not very good. But you did say by the end of the conversation, I swear this is true, you were like, look, it was shit, but it's Star Wars, man.
And that's our review of The Phantom Menace. Thank you. Have a nice day.
What?
I watched this after I watched The Mandalorian. And maybe that was a mistake.
Big mistake.
I think so. I think it was, because I was actually saying to myself, I'm going to come into this and I'm going to And my kid, this was my kid's first real Star Wars movie. He loves this movie. So, Liam, I swear to you, I'm not going to beat on it. I really am not. Better people than Joe and I have done extensive reviews. In fact, if you haven't, Red Letter Media's Mr. Plinkett breaks down The Phantom Menace is an exquisite, beautiful takedown of this movie. So, Liam, I'm sorry. Okay, I love you, and I know that this is a favorite of yours, and I'm not going to beat on it too badly, but I have to give how I felt. The movie is meandering. It is a story that doesn't feel as complete as it should. The positives. I'm going to start with the positives. The first thing that I was able to realize as I was watching this is at least I like these characters more than I liked any of the characters in the sequel trilogies. I liked Qui-Gon Jinn. I liked Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ian McDermott is just, a godsend. That man's voice is alone. Every time he talks, I'm okay. I'm fine with him as Senator Palpatine. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The lightsaber fights are still some of the best lightsaber fights that have ever been put on film, as far as I'm concerned. That's done by Nick Gillard. But the story really just doesn't kind of go anywhere. Okay? It opens with a trade dispute and ends with a huge battle that, kind of outdoes or tries to outdo the Battle of Endor. And in some respects, it does. Visually, the one thing you can't say bad about this movie is its visual effects. They did a hell of a job with the visual effects. There are moments of clunkiness in them, but I really enjoyed the look and feel of the space battles. I like that they mostly were still using models at the time, so I felt that all looked great. And again, the lightsaber battles were great, but on the whole, my life didn't change. It didn't get better. It hasn't improved with age as I hoped it would. And honestly, it's like I was saying, I kind of feel like The Mandalorian sapped that, because a part of me is like, at least, there's a decent, this is a decent Star Wars thing. No, it spends time showing but not telling, it's good. When it starts talking to you, you just want to crawl into a ball, cry, and say, make it stop, make it stop. And there's my mini review.
Well, I will. I'm going to take issue with something you said right out of the gate. You said the effects still hold up. I found
the space
most
effects.
Of it.
The space effects, I think, are the only thing that hold up. All the other effects, everything with the robots and stuff like that, do not hold up.
Yeah, all of that CGI stuff, all that Jar Jar, all the Gungan, and all the walking on green screens. Yeah, that's really. I found that to be much more obvious now, especially. But anyway, yeah, I'm totally with you when you talk about how we probably should have waited on The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But then again, we sort of said last week that, well, it's going to be interesting now to see if how the movie feels after watching the last 2 episode movies, hoping that this would sort of perk up. Well, now we kind of went the other way. Now we saw something really great. And we have that to factor in. I was actually kind of surprised that the film did not age well for me. It didn't really. I was kind of hoping to look back and say, well, at least it's kind of an original story. It's not this obnoxious fan service. And again, after The Force Awakens, just a retelling of Star Wars, and again, I still say that the Force Awakens had one job and one job only, and that was to be the not prequels. because the prequels left a bad taste in people's mouths, and I swear that somebody just got the memo. I don't care what you do as long as it's far from what the prequels were. I want Star Wars again, and that's all they did. So yeah, I was really hoping to come back to this and kind of be like, well, it's original, it's this, it's that. And I will say this, and Liam, I'm talking to you, buddy. I kind of feel like if this was not a Star Wars movie, if this was not something that we waited, X many years to get, and we really had these kind of hopes and dreams of it kind of feeling like the originals, if this was just its own thing, like a decent sci-fi swashbuckling adventure, it wouldn't be that terrible. I mean, again, the story is clunky. There's really slow, but if you just looked at it, if you try to compare it to like the multitude of other science fiction movies that came out after Star Wars, I mean, again, it's got enough just interesting eye candy stuff to watch. Yeah, but as a Star Wars movie, yeah, it is wildly disappointing on multiple levels, and I will sort of say this, like I've kind of always defended one part of this film in that, like, I think people always said it didn't feel like Star Wars. It like these Naboo scenes where the settings look a little more like something out of like Krull or like something that has a little more storybookish. You know what I mean? And that whole argument, by the way, about how it's made for kids, I've never bought it. I don't buy it today. But I do agree that this film should have had a little bit more of that kind of feel to it, that sort of fantasy, almost like a Dungeons and Dragons, for lack of a better way to say it, kind of feel to some of the settings. Because this was sort of supposed to be the good old days before everything went to hell, before the Empire. Everything was supposed to be pretty good. So I don't mind the different look and feel of it from the first trilogy. But again, having said that, there are so many things about it that are just sort of like mind-bogglingly dumb. There are some scenes where I mean, like, there were moments when I was sort of going back and forth looking at things, and I would, have to sort of scrub back and forth, and I'd be like, man, we're still in this part. Like, the part leading up to the pod race takes forever. Yeah. Like, it's a lot of talking about, how we're going to bet. I need a part. It just takes forever. So, yeah, and like you said before, the Blinkett reviews, I mean, they kind of uncovered every nook and cranny of this film that's sort of funny and weird and awkward. So, turning us all into armchair film critics, by the way, but...
You and I were doing film criticism long before we saw this movie, so...
Well, yeah, but we were only doing it when no one was looking.
That's true. Excuse me. All very true, man. All very true. It is a disappointing piece of cinema to watch that, kind of feels like there's the Phantom edit. Have you heard of the Phantom edit?
I've heard of it. I've never sat down for it.
I had it at one point. I wound up never watching it. I never got around to watching it, and I'm kind of sad I didn't, because there is a lot about this movie that feels like it could be saved with some edits here and there. The build up to the pod race is exhausting, and every little thing that's explained, every time there is exposition, you cringe. Every single damn time. He has to complete 2 more circuits. Oh my. It's like, we can figure that out. Why is it you trust us with some... Like, there's this part in the pod race, and I like the pod race, and I still like the pod race, and I still found it to be exciting and enjoyable. Yeah, it's a CGI fest, whatever, who cares? I still enjoyed it. But there's this one part in the pod race where Anakin's pod breaks down, and... a part flies off and smoke comes out of it. And there's no talking throughout it. And you see him, move his things around in a little display. But everything that happens is explained visually. And it became like my favorite moment in the entire freaking trilogy. In the entire movie, not the entire trilogy, excuse me. Because I was like, yes, that's what you need to do, George. This is where your talents are. Your talents are not in dialogue. That is your biggest weakness. But visually, the man can tell a story visually very, very well. It's like a quick thing, 1 minute, and everything you need to know. He closes the flaps. The flap puts the fire out, and then he moves some stuff around. He transfers over energy from the one pod to the other that had gotten drained out from the fire, and then he gets it working again with no words. Like, oh no, my thing is on fire. You would expect with all the other freaking exposition stuff that they had earlier that they would do that. It's like it still remains my favorite moment in the movie. I love that. That and during the lightsaber fight at the end, where where logic. Let's throw logic out the window for a second. There is no logic as to what the hell that corridor is all about in the lightsaber fight at the end, but I don't care because it was done in a visual way to explain what was happening. They're cut off. Everybody's taking a break. Everybody knows, and I love like the little subtlety in that moment where Qui-Gon Jinn's like, okay, we're trapped, and he just goes down and he meditates. And there's Darth Maul like a freaking panther with his eyes just on Qui-Gon, walking back and forth. And there's like Obi-Wan just kind of bouncing like, I want to get him, I want to get him, I want to get him. I loved that. I love that little subtlety, and it shows me that there is something there is something there that Lucas could have done to save this. And if you ask me, the biggest thing that went wrong with this trilogy is no. Nobody said no to Uncle George.
Yeah. I had a really good analogy, or I had a good comparison. There's the unfettered freedom that he had for this. Again, it's the creativity by adversity that they say, and it goes back to like Jaws. Like it works so much better because you didn't see the shark all the time, but had the thing been working properly, you probably would have saw it a lot more. This is again, if you just left everything in the hands of George Lucas, who just wrote everything down on a pad of paper and just did his first initial thought, without reworking. I never heard anything in terms of like a second draft. Like he just wrote it down and we're done. And now let's go make the movie. In fact, one of my favorite quotes from the Red Letter Media is, using special effects to tell a story, George uses a story to tell special effects. And I find that to be wildly, wildly true. I honestly believe that in some respects that was literally all his motivation was. I think George is a very technical filmmaker. He loves gadgets. He loves technology. And when he saw what was going on in the world of CGI, he was like, I want to do that. And he decided to dust off Star Wars and do it again. And he just wrote some characters. He says, well, I know where I got to end up. So I just write. And then by the end, I get a Darth Vader. But yeah, watching this, and I've also heard it argued that this movie is such a colossal, literal waste of time in terms of the bigger story. Like, why? What do we actually learn about any of the characters in this? Like if you drop this one all together and started with the Clone Wars, Revenge of the like what's the point of meeting Anakin when he's a little boy?
You miss out on the fact that he's Jesus. You miss out on the fact that he built C-3PO. You miss out on the you miss out on the ooey goo and the pod race, and I understand what George wanted. Okay, he wanted to show a motivation for why Obi-Wan decided to take Anakin on as a Padawan, and I understand that they're trying to do this immaculate midichlorianception, thing going on here. And I get it, okay? That's fine. I see what it is you were trying to do. But is that really effective? Is that really necessary? I mean, but then again, in defense of this particular movie, which, I'm going to hopefully not say too much of, but in defense of this movie, considering the later films, considering how badly the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin evolves and how they're supposed to be these great friends and they really don't demonstrate any of that maybe we needed this to remind us, Obi-Wan feels responsible for him for a promise to Qui-Gon. That's really the basis of their friendship. Maybe that's why we needed it. It's a freaking stretch. I know.
Yeah. No, I know. I know you're trying. Well, a couple things. First of all, I wish you could have seen the eye roll as soon as you said the word midichlorians. I will get back to that because I have some things to say about that. But I've always, from the time I saw X-Men First Class, I said to myself then, that is what the relationship between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi should have been. Like, I think there could have been, like, a very, very interesting grown-up relationship like that one, like between Xavier and Magneto. Again, they're both fighting the same battle, but they both have sort of different experiences, which makes them see everything very differently. And their two philosophies, again, even though they are friends, even though they have been through a lot, the two philosophies can't coexist. And that's what this relationship should have been. So, again, just this kid, yippee, this is pod racing, does nothing for me. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
But yet, foundationally,
and again,
weirdly, you're kind of, in a weird way, you're kind of proving my point, because foundationally, and I'm not saying it works. I'm just saying that's what Lucas was going for. Foundationally, you have Anakin, who was brought up a slave. You have Obi-Wan, who was brought up, from the day he was born, he was with the Jedi. So right there, you have a particularly interesting viewpoints that can clash and can make some interesting, drama and can make some interesting interactions, which they never exploit.
I will not condone a course of action that will lead us to war.
A communications disruption can mean only one thing: invasion.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
Begin landing your troops.
We haven't much time.
The Federation has gone too far.
The death toll is catastrophic.
Our people are dying, Senator. We must do something quickly.
You must contact me.
There is something else behind all this, Your Highness. They will kill you if you stay. I can only protect you. I can't fight a war for you.
I think we're going to have to accept Federation control for the time being.
This is a battle I do not think that we can win.
I will sign no treaty, Senator.
You said people gonna die?
Once those droids take control of the surface, they will take control of you.
I was not elected to watch my people suffer and die while you discuss this invasion in a committee.
Yes, absolutely, very much so. And right, the idea that, I remember watching this movie, kind of feeling like Anakin is supposedly a slave, and I'm saying to myself, like, when you watch this film, you sort of say to yourself, well, what does that even mean in this context? I mean, he shows up for work, he goes home, he eats dinner with his mother, he has his hobbies. I'm not seeing the slave part. It doesn't work in this film. Like I feel like it's just lip service, really. It's like just something to say,
at best, indentured servitude,
to eventually separate something. Yeah. But right, I think the only reason why they even say that is because when they take Anakin away and leave the mother behind, that's the only thing I can come up with for why they actually, try that. But in what you were saying before, by the way, again, I'm going to do my best not to keep referencing Red Letter Media, but when they make the point in their reviews about how the whole sort of prequel trilogy as a whole, the comparison to Citizen Kane, I think is spot on. And I think that is literally what George Lucas is trying to do. He's trying to make this thing epic enough to say that we've watched this little boy from being a child all the way to this journey to becoming Darth Vader. And again, I don't think it works, because again, why like Anakin in this film is a good guy. I mean, I also love the argument that there's really no central protagonist in the film either, by the way. But Anakin is kind of like this likable kid. And yes, so it's almost like this film is trying very hard to make me feel very sympathetic towards Darth Vader. Which I kind of don't see the point. I mean, I get that in Jedi there's a, he gets his redemption in Jedi. So I suppose you have to sort of see the good guy underneath. But again, it's so, and it gets clunkier as we go forward. But so again, my point being is I kind of feel like this as a starting point, I really don't see any value in it.
I feel bad for Jake Lloyd.
I do too.
It's not, the kid is not a strong actor. Let's be plain. And I feel bad for the abuse that kid has had to suffer since then. I really do. And he has had to suffer some nasty stuff. He won't even do conventions anymore because people just it got bad. But it has to be said, he is a weak link. If he in a movie without protagonists, when we're supposed to feel sympathetic for a character, he's it's the people around him that make me feel sympathetic for him, not him himself. Like John Williams and Cornelia August deserve all the credit in the world for the scene where the mother says goodbye to Anakin. Okay? And it's an emotional scene, and it's filmed well, and Cornelia August acts the ever-living hell out of the scene. I think she did a great job for what she had, and John Williams is sweeping, the whole thing and everything like that. Wonderful, beautiful, but then I look at that poor blank-faced kid, and I think to myself, oh, God, that scene could have been beautiful with a better actor. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm sorry.
You know what? I'll even do you one better, honestly. I kind of feel like, first of all, I think child actors in general are really a crapshoot at best. I mean, I can't really think of any young actors that age who are really, really good. I mean, the only one that kind of comes to mind would be like Haley Joel Osment. But even then, he's working with, I think, pretty competent directors. George Lucas is a guy, not only does he grab this poor kid who's probably not very experienced and gives him lines that no one could say. And I mean, all of the adult actors are struggling with these awkward lines that are just awful and don't make sense. But then you're also working with a director like George Lucas, who is notorious for not being a people person. He's not very good with actors. He just, all right, Jake, go say this.
That's more intense.
Go say this. And then, yeah, right, exactly. So I feel like this guy's, he really did sort of get the shaft. And there's almost like no hope for this kid, really. But yeah, it's so. And all of the performances are so. I mean, this is one of the things that they're so wooden, they're so stilted. Everything that is spoken in this movie, I kind of find that all of the dialogue scenes, and there's a lot of them, are just so painful, like so painful. Every time, I mean, how do you make Liam Neeson boring? Well, here you go. How do you make Ewan McGregor boring? How do you make Samuel L. Mother effing Jackson boring? Here you go. I mean, it's so shockingly dull. And I've said this to you before. I can't stand when I hear like Padme talk.
Oh, when she's doing that phony little,
I can't. Chancellor Valorum, blah, 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 like, I can't. That is like children. Like, how do adults talk? Adults talk like this because they're so boring. Like, that's George Lucas trying to just be as pretentious and as you could possibly be. It doesn't work. I hate that, and it's because it's like so. And then like the moment where like she pops up from behind, I'm really the queen, and and she's sort of so down to earth and regular. Oh, it's so refreshing. My eyes roll way the hell out of my head. I can't.
You do look a little cockeyed, man. I will admit that.
So by the way, can we talk about the other elephant in the room?
Don't you mean the Gungan in the room?
Yeah. Let's talk about the Metachlorians.
Oh, well, okay. We'll get to the Gungan in the room in a couple of minutes.
Here's something that I know I've told you before, and I've kind of been chomping at the bit to do my little spiel on this. In fact, I've actually, yeah, I've kind of, even over the years, I've sort of been like kicking around the idea of doing a video on this. People can't understand what the hell happened to George Lucas. They watch the prequels and they watch Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and they're like, what the heck happened to this guy? Well, let me tell you, here's my theory. And if I was going to write the essay or do a video, here's what the title would be. George Lucas hates God and is going to hell.
You know what? I remember this. You actually you started a little paragraph of this when we did Kingdom of the Crystal Skull review.
You know what? Did I already kind of go off on this already? Maybe
you did, because we went over this. You mentioned it in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull video. Absolutely, you did.
All right, so maybe I won't go.
Absolutely. I want you to reprise. But people, if you want to hear the full, because I think we had a good 15 minutes just on that alone, I think, in that episode. So please, go find our Kingdom of the Crystal Skull review to hear. But Joe, please, go for it. Hit it.
I'll do it quick. Basically, my theory is that as George Lucas got older, and a guy who at one point in his career was inspired by tales about a man's journey, a hero's journey, and a lot of it has to do with faith. And I'm not talking specifically religion, but I'm not talking about religion either. A lot of the themes that happened in George Lucas's earlier films had a foundation that had a lot to do with faith, whether it's the Force. And if you notice, when they're talking about the Force in the original trilogy, they're talking about it the way people would discuss religion, believers versus non-believers, etc. And in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones went after religious artifacts, and the sort of twist in Raiders is, again, it was sort of a question of like, do I believe this? Do I not believe this? Indiana Jones says early on, I don't believe hocus pocus, etc. And then by the end, he does become a believer. He believes, and the real things happen would make you a believer anyway. Then you get to George Lucas later in life, and he's totally had some sort of a transformation where he's not so interested in faith anymore. In fact, now he'd much rather attribute things that he used to call faith. Now we're talking science. Now he's a believer in science. So now the Force is reduced to microscopic organisms, which frankly kind of sounds a lot like Scientology, but I won't go too far down that rabbit hole.
I'm pretty sure he's not a Scientologist. He still has all of money.
You're right. I don't think so either. But again, there's that kind of mentality that can kind of permeate Hollywood. But like I said, I won't go too deep into the. And this is also why in Crystal Skull people said, why the hell would he do aliens? Why would you have aliens in an Indiana Jones movie? Well, there you go. Because he doesn't want to do religious artifacts anymore. He doesn't want to deal in that world anymore. So now he has to go science and science fiction. And I sort of feel like that is sort of an explanation as to why these films feel so cold and uncaring, because there is no real emotional journey. Like any story, most stories, when you're talking about like just kind of storytelling 101, there's that the lie that the hero believes.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, they come to the realization of something. And part of that, like in the original Star Wars, the climax of the movie is when Ben Kenobi from beyond says, "Use the Force, Luke."
Yeah.
And Luke uses the Force. He comes to believe that, what's been sort of, happening all along. And he now believes, and he puts his faith in something. And that's how we win the day. This has none of that. It's just, I got midichlorians and I'm a good shot, basically.
Yo,
again,
I got your midichlorians right here, yo.
So there's my little tangent about George Lucas, and again, just one of the reasons, aside from just total ineptness in storytelling, one of the reasons why these movies don't work.
Midichlorians do not bother me. It's the clunky way that they were introduced. If you want to try to put a little science behind your little mysticism, you know what? It's your movie. You go ahead. You have a good time. But you did a terrible job of explaining it. You did a terrible job of bringing it in. And you were obviously embarrassed about it because the M word is never spoken ever again.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I still recall the first time watching this and just being baffled at the whole concept of it. And again, it took me a while to sort of come to terms or realize what it was, and I believe it's what I said. But yeah, I just think that is so poorly done, and it's just such a bad idea in general. I mean, again, the whole Star Wars is sort of founded on the Force. Like that was the phrase that was Star Wars. May the Force be with you. Mm-hmm. Use the Force. I like why you would abandon that and go for this other thing, even if you don't want to focus on it, even if you want to kind of, I don't know. It's just I just find the whole thing bizarre and baffling that he would do that. And that's kind of not even getting into a lot of other little like. I feel like we're well into this, and I feel like there's a million things we could still be talking about, and we haven't even touched. But
well, we're going to touch on one last thing before we get to it because we're actually running. We're doing good. We've covered a lot of the things. Yeah. But I gotta cover this. There's no way around it. We've got to cover it. We've got to talk about the Gungan in the room. It has to be done. What the hell? What in God's name was that supposed to be? I mean, at the time, like people started talking about how, oh my God, this is such a racial stereotype. It's like, you know what? You want to go down that path? Fine. Let's talk about the damn character itself. Was this supposed to be your comedic relief? Well, you didn't do a good job with that now, did you?
But Jar Jar's the key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working.
I think you know what the best thing about Jar Jar is? The fan theories. Have you heard the fan theories?
That he's really he's the one that brought down the whole universe, basically?
Yes.
Yes.
I like that theory. I don't know if that was where Lucas was originally supposed to go or not, because I swear to you, the funny part about these prequels is as it goes along, you realize that the criticisms of Phantom Menace, like Lucas must have taken it to heart because he starts changing things, not at the benefit of the story, but in a way to try to please fans. And whatever original idea that he had, like Jar Jar is the key to all this. This was the quote that you heard from the making of the first one. I always remember that. It's like, well, I guess Jar Jar has a bigger part to play than we even think. And then Jar Jar by the second movie is just nothing. He's a background character. He's less than a background character. And I kind of feel bad for Ahmed Best because he probably thought he had this great gig going on and everything like that, only to be like, oh, no, sorry, man, nothing we can do about it. Kids didn't like you, so you're relegated to the background. I like and I think he kept it enough to have Jar Jar be the one to bring up the vote to, make the Grand Army of the Republic. But I swear to you, I feel like Jar Jar was supposed to be a minion of Palpatine. That would have been so delicious if he had actually gone that way. As it was, he was like, he's for 11-year-olds. That's what he's supposed to be. But he's terrible at being for 11-year-olds. This is what I wrote down. I understand the purpose of Jar Jar. It's his use I question.
Say it again?
His use. Like, I understood what the purpose of Jar Jar was supposed to be. The way they utilized him, however, is what didn't work.
Yeah, I suppose. I feel that he was just, one of the things when you watch this movie, and I've heard, we've all heard that every alien in this is a racial stereotype.
Uh-huh.
And again, it's funny, and it's like, I totally agree with it, but I sort of feel like I don't think George Lucas meant anything by it. I just think he's a poor creator. So, I mean, seriously, Watto is like an Arab or something, or
some people say Jewish, some people say Italian. Yeah, it could be interpreted many different ways.
I've heard Arab, I've heard Jewish, and I mean the viceroys are obviously Asians and stuff, and it's like, again,
we would never do anything without George Lucas doesn't have this sentence. No, that one's the
right. Seriously, but again, I don't think George has he doesn't really have the level of creativity it takes to come up with something that's not based on something that he sees every day or whatever. So yeah, this whole Jar Jar thing, I was like, I mean, I can still see pictures of George, in the making of documentaries where they show him kind of walking around like, look, make him walk funny like this. He does the Jar Jar walk. Uh-huh. It's like, really? Oh, so yeah, it is pretty cringy and just not funny and annoying. So all that stuff.
I can only protect you. I can't fight a war for you.
I think we're going to have to accept Federation control for the time being.
This is a battle I do not think that we can win.
I will sign no treaty, Senator.
You said people gonna die?
How annoying are we talking, my man? It's time.
Who's going first? Who's gonna crush your son's hopes and dreams first?
I'm not gonna crush him too bad. It's not good. Okay? It is better, in my opinion, than The Force Awakens. It is absolutely better than The Last Jedi. It does not hold a candle to the original trilogy, and it sure as hell can't touch The Mandalorian. But there are moments in this movie that I still like, and there are moments in this movie that it's eye-rolling, but it's beautiful to watch. I feel like if I ever watch this movie, and in fact, many of the times, because Liam used to watch it multiple times, that I did watch it, I kind of would just drone out and just kind of watch it. It is a beautiful looking film. Lucas knows how to frame a shot. You got to give him that. And I really do like some of the I liked the pod race. I liked the lightsaber fights. I thought the space battles looked beautiful. Star Wars, debatable. And in fact, we did debate it. And, it's tacitly Star Wars. It's a tad more Star Wars than the new trilogies are Star Wars. But that doesn't forgive it. But I'll say this much. I didn't fall asleep watching it. And I've been working a lot of hours at my new job. And it's been one of the reasons why it's been so hard to do the Terminator movies, because the last two before we got to the one that was on the screen were just so droning and boring that it's no wonder I fell asleep watching them. I didn't fall asleep watching this. I won't say I was like completely engaged in the movie, but I will say that it's still not a terrible movie to look at. So I got to give it that. And it is the start of the new trilogy. The necessity of it is debatable. I kind of feel like it's a 5. I'm not going to slam this movie hard because I still miss George. I still feel like if George had the right people above him molding him, I think we would have had a great flick.
I will agree with a lot of what you just said. I'm not that far off score-wise. One of the things I said earlier, honestly, I do, like I said, I sort of feel like it would be interesting if someone took this script or it'd be interesting to look into a crystal ball and say, what if this movie was pretty much as is, but not a Star Wars movie? Like, you just tweaked it a little bit, and you called it like a generic science fiction film. Again, I find it to be so far removed from the first trilogy that if you did this as something else, you could have tweaked it and said, and you know, there's a world out there somewhere where this movie exists and it's not a Star Wars movie, and I'd be curious to see how people would react to it. Again, it would probably be looked at as kind of like one of those generic B science fiction movies that was sort of in the again, it was kind of like Star Wars, but somewhere like in between Star Wars and Krull. And it would be passable. But as a Star Wars movie, I find that to be it's just shockingly bad. And again, and just to sort of, as one last little thought, again, I've said before how it sort of drives me a little nutty when people say that Star Wars was made for kids. And I'm not saying it wasn't per se, but when you craft something as perfectly as the first one is crafted, you get something by nature that will appeal to every age because it's that good. And the thing people should remember, the original Star Wars was not just George Lucas. George Lucas surrounded himself with the brightest, most innovative minds in Hollywood at the time. He had the original Star Wars. Again, you want to talk about a movie for kids? You had John Milius, who helped with Star Wars. You had Francis Ford Coppola, who helped out with Star Wars. I mean, again, you had the brightest mind. And by the way, you had George Lucas's then wife, who a lot of people have said is kind of almost the real genius behind George Lucas. So again, you had some amazing minds crafting that film. So again, the idea that this was just a kiddie movie made for kids, I'm like, yeah, no, you're really missing the point. Anyway, George left to his own devices. You want to talk about when you've been on top for too long and you let yourself get soft? This is George here. I'm going to give it a 4. Again, visually, there's a lot that is interesting to look at. There are a lot of, like you said, visual. The visuals, again, I think what he really has is a lot of very good design people, designing the creatures, designing the ships, designing the costumes. A lot of it ends up being sort of a clunky mess because the structure is very poor. It doesn't fit organically. So again, it's like on one hand, you have very interesting visuals, but yet you got A camera, B camera, the camera is sort of always placed at sort of eye level and everyone's, anyway, the bottom line is when you ranked it, I don't know if I would put it above some of those things per se, because it's sort of an apples to oranges comparison. Like even when we reviewed Last Jedi, I said as much as the story is terrible and as much as it's a middle finger to Star Wars fans, it visually was very good. It was very striking. I can't take that away from it. Here I find other weaknesses, other strengths, but all in all, it's a very weird, bland. I mean it's bland. It's bland and boring, and it's hard. You know how when you're watching a movie sometimes and you'll see it a couple times and you'll sort of catch extras in the background, just kind of like doing nothing, but trying to look busy or something or other. I feel like this film is loaded with that, and it's almost like it's not even necessarily extras in the background. It's like sometimes it's the players on camera that if they're not talking, they don't know what to do with themselves. Because again, George can't direct people. So yeah, that's it. That's my 4. And that's about it.
Damn. Well, what about Who Asked You? Do I even broach this particular subject?
I had there was a couple things that were sort of floating around in my mind. I kind of can't remember which one I wanted to go with. You know what? I sort of feel like only because remember the force speed in the opening.
Yes.
I still look back on it. I swear when I saw it the first time, I was like, what the heck was that? I literally thought it was a mistake. I thought this was like an error. Like the film sped up for a second or something went wrong and something happened, because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And to this day, I look back at that, I'm like, that is so weird. And again, there's a million other things I could point at, but I felt like when I was watching it today, I was like, you know what? That's so bizarre. Again, you never saw it again. It just happened this one time where the two of them zipped out of the frame, and
boy, he could have used that speed at the end, couldn't he?
Big time, right? Exactly. You never ever saw it again, and you know, that's the thing with this trilogy that always kind of drove me a little nutty. And I won't fast forward, but it's like the weird powers that the Jedis have. It's like, are they supposed to be superheroes? You know, I so many times when they're doing something that is just so fantastic, I'm like, that makes no sense at all. It would just really just drive me nuts. So anyway, so yeah, that's every time I see that, I'm like, that is the weirdest, stupidest thing ever. So I'll give it to that.
That's a good one, man. I'm gonna give you that, because that was actually kind of a sticking point with me as well. For me, one thing that I think would have made the difference for the entire trilogy: Rick McCallum.
Okay.
Do you know who Rick McCallum is?
Yes. Is he the guy? George is so this and George is so that.
Yes. He is the producer of this movie. He is the person that should have had the power to say no, or this doesn't work, or he is the reason that George had, you know, to paraphrase the Emperor in Revenge of the Sith, unlimited power.
Mm-hmm.
And that is his detriment. Honestly, that was the biggest detriment in the world that this movie suffers from, is not having anybody around. Everybody around George was way too sycophantic and way too, you know, worshiping at his vision, which is, you know what? That's great. It's great that you have this vision and everything like that, but you can't let vision override story, like you were saying earlier. Okay? This movie desperately missed Mr. Gary Kurtz, who we have covered before. Okay? Gary Kurtz is the guy who said no to George, who was not afraid of George, and who helped keep the production of the original Star Wars, and to a lesser extent, and actually to more of an extent, The Empire Strikes Back. He is desperately missing a Gary Kurtz. So, you want me to know what I would change? I would change Rick McCallum.
Yeah, remember how every time we talked about the Stallone films in the 80s and George P. Cosmatos was his director?
Director in name only, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I kind of feel like no matter who, you know, if it wasn't Rick McCallum, it would have been somebody else very similar, who was, like you said, that handpicked by George to let George do whatever George felt like. And, it's... But you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. When George Lucas lost or got rid of the people who disagreed with him or who, you know, butted up against him sometimes, that's when everything went to hell.
For your consideration?
You know, I'm kind of struggling with this one as well. And I felt like I thought for sure something was going to bubble to the surface and I was going to really sort of praise the film in some way. I just feel like I can find certain things I can kind of defend in spirit. But yeah, I don't, there's not much. I will say that, Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor, you know, I kind of feel like when he's on screen and believe me, they ruined him too. So it's not a high praise. But when he's
through
present,
no fault of the actor, we should make that clear.
Exactly, right. It's again, that is another thing that could have been brilliant about these prequels, but I'm like, boy, how did you drop the ball there? But I don't want to fast forward. But I felt like whenever he was on camera, he was solid, and I just sort of felt like he was a good presence because he was a solid actor. He knew what he was doing, and you sort of felt like it was almost like he was the only thing kind of holding the film together in a way to sort of give you some sense that there is some structure and some vision in this film about where this is going to go. Again, they dropped the ball later. It totally ruined him, frankly, but I'll give it to him.
That's actually a good one to do. He would have been my choice as well. He was definitely on my list for your consideration. Honestly, I'm going to give it to Nick Gillard. Nick Gillard was the stunt coordinator who choreographed all the lightsaber fights, and I still got giddy watching the lightsaber fights. I thought they were great. I thought they were well acted, well performed. And I'm gonna give it to him. I feel like if anybody was slacking in this movie, it was certainly not the production people who came up with some really interesting concepts and ideas. It certainly wasn't the people working on the visual effects for the space shots, because I thought they all looked great. And I'm gonna give an extra little bit to Nick Gillard for his sword play. The guy is an amazing sword choreographer. And he went on actually to choreograph the Zorro movies, the two Antonio Banderas Zorro movies, which I thought had great, sword choreography. But yes, there's for your consideration. I'm giving it to Nick Gillard.
All right, I like that. I'll take it. I figure as long as we're kind of giving a little praise, I will sort of also throw in, give Jake Lloyd a break. I really don't feel that kid did.
It's not his fault.
It's really not his fault. And honestly, again, when you watch the film and you hear the stunted, clunky dialogue from all of the actors. I mean, he's doing scenes with Liam Neeson, who doesn't fare any better. I mean, that's Liam Neeson. So yeah, I just kind of feel like that. I feel like that kid really does get kind of a raw deal. I mean, it was a bad decision to have any children in this movie, frankly, because again, I feel like it's not at all what this movie's about, or shouldn't have been about. But again, if you're going to, I felt like he does no worse than any of the other more polished actors in this whole movie. So, and by the way, I think Darth Maul is overrated.
Darth Maul has his uses and his purposes, but like Boba Fett, people gave way too much to the character than needed to be. He was supposed to be a pit bull, a one-time deal character. That was it. And, I feel he was effective for what he was supposed to be. But that was supposed to be the end of it. Every time they brought him back, I'm like, really? Okay. I guess that's cool. And thus ends our review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Not quite the crap show we were thinking we thought it was going to be. I think we've gotten a little soft in our old age, and probably, we just kind of appreciated it a little bit more, just a tiny, tiny bit more than we might have at the time. Well, I mean, at the time I basically was on a high, and then I had to come down to like a really low, and now I'm in this happy middle, which I guess is the reason why I gave it a 5. Because, it's like, you know what? It's not the worst Star Wars. It is certainly not the best Star Wars, but it didn't offend me, I guess is the best way to say it, which is not really a good thing to say.
Right. Hardly a compliment, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Wipe them out. All of them.
But next week, oh boy. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we continue down this path of Star Wars. These next couple of weeks are going to be both interesting and frustrating. This has been rough. We went from Terminator, now we're doing the original Star Wars prequels. We're going to be coming up to the Jumanjis, which I'm not sure how you're going to react to the Jumanjis. So I'm very curious about that. But next week, we are doing Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, with Hayden Christensen.
Oh, this will be fun.
You and I both have a strange idea of what fun is, but there it is. All right, so until then, my man, I think we actually covered a great deal about this movie without, stealing too much from Red Letter Media.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we were successful in not kind of repeating everything that's already been said.
Agreed.
I'll take it.
So until next time, sir, have a nice night, my man.
You too, my friend, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. And be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube for spoiler-free reviews of new releases. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find our page on patreon.com. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are used for commentary and critique, and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
Sally Johnson is a real person, not an actor. So to tell her story, we hired the star of Phantom Menace.
I was driving down my street when a truck hit me head on.
Awesome knows. There's a trucker coming! He's gonna die!
Yes, I was fine, but the car was totaled.
Hurry, Patootie, it's a mess! Got the engine over here, but the wheel for steering way over there!
My agent at Gecko Insurance sent me a check right away.
You should not even gonna believe this. Joey, we win the money.
I think I was explaining it better than he was.
Gecko. Real help. Real money.
Misa thinks me broke me bum bad spine. Did they say cut?